I'm Bronwyn Morgan with ZO Air, and I am at AUVSI Xponential 2021 here in Atlanta. And it's so exciting to bring our podcast, ZOcast, live to AUVSI. We're talking to industry leaders across geospatial, drones, robotics, space, artificial intelligence, AI-based weather systems, and so much more, including advanced aerial mobility, UTM, government. It doesn't stop. So look forward to you joining us and listening to our leaders talk about what's happening with unmanned systems, drones, and more. Well, we're excited this morning to have Don Berchoff with us. Don is the CEO of TruWeather Solutions and also retired colonel from the U.S. Air Force. And you can follow him at GetTruWeather at Twitter. Don, welcome again to ZOcast. Good to have you today.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here. You know, we just had some really tough weather blow through.
We did.
And good day to fly though today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Don, you've got a very, amazing background in this space. And I know we've talked before, people can find you on our podcast. But how did you develop your professional credentials and interest in weather?
Well, the interest started when I was probably about 7 years old, and weather is one of those passions that a lot of meteorologists have. They figure out early when they're young that this is really interesting stuff, and it's just the discovery of figuring out why this happens that really drives it. But I went to school, got my degree in meteorology, joined the Air Force. I thought I was only going to spend 4 years in the Air Force, but it turned out to be 24 years. And my credentials are really just, I flew, I had 300 hours as an aircrew meteorologist. I learned, a lot about how our products are not necessarily always accurate enough to support the crews and the operations. Some of those technologies and science we're still struggling with some of it, icing, turbulence.
Right.
And then I built the big regional weather center in central, in Illinois. I actually ran Manas Air Base in Central Asia, which got me a lot of understanding of logistics and weather and moving cargo and supply chain. And then I went to the Weather Service. I was a science and technology director for 4 years, and I got to see all the great science that was in the labs and universities, and we could not get it into operations. And it frustrated me. I had a $130 million a year budget, but I felt like I couldn't get the good stuff out,
Right.
So after 4 years, I decided that I would go in the private sector. I thought that I would have a bigger impact on the outside, trying to drive innovation in weather and try to improve our performance in the economy and really drive micro weather solutions, and then build a platform that would make it simple to plug and play different sensor types, so you don't put a lot of responsibility on the end user. You tell somebody, buy a sensor, and they go, what do I do with it? Well, you don't have to worry about that. We'll plug it in, we'll make it available through our platform, and you'll have micro weather at your location, and that's going to feed our analytics and make the weather better. So I'm focusing on this drone industry because this is the best business case for micro weather.
Right.
And we're going to drive a lot of innovation in this area, and this is going to lead us in the weather business to be disruptive.
Okay. So, that's a lofty goal. And so what would you say is the primary mission for TruWeather? Like in one sentence, if you can.
Yeah, unleash the power of science and technology into simple interface to improve decisions.
Right.
Yeah.
And why right now is this such an integral part of UAV and AAM operations?
Well, 40% of all flights today, even manned aviation that are grounded due to weather, can fly.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
And so what's happening is when we look at this industry and we start scaling it, that's not going to be acceptable in their business model. Mm-hmm. And the way that we drive down that rate is by increasing the certainty in the weather where we don't have weather today.
Right.
So we have better knowledge, so we can say, all right, you can get up early, fly early or come down at this time. You don't have to come down an hour early because you don't know when it's coming. We say you can stay up another hour, get more flight time, get more revenue, and then we'll keep those windows really tight. They're going to find, this industry is going to find in areas where you have climate that doesn't always behave, that if they don't get ahead of this weather problem, they're going to be dropping money on the floor, and they're also going to have clients that are not going to be happy because predictability, and they're not going to get what they want. So what our job is in TruWeather is to make sure you get as much flight time as possible safely, you drive revenue, increase profitability, and we're going to help you be successful at not losing that money or the opportunity cost that you're losing today.
Wow, I mean the tighter revenue is so critical, and when we first started having conversations, that was one of the things I mentioned to you, that weather will impact our business, especially in the heat of the summer, and then also in the peak of the winter, just because of the equipment capability. And you just can't have drones that fly in the spring and in the summer and in the fall. You do need a 365-year solution. And with the dramatic changes that we're seeing in weather and more intensified outcomes and occurrences, how do you see this impacting this whole future of autonomous operations, especially? What do you think? Do you think that the climate challenges will become even more intense and impact us even more?
Well, I think that we're going to see, I think the key here is that we can deal with the weather if we know when and where it's going to happen, right? And it's in your planning. You probably have that in your mission planning. You're scheduling 3 days out. You're trying to target the good windows. You narrow it down. We could get around the nasty weather. The challenge right now is people just go out and they fly and they can't fly and they waste money sending people out there, and they don't believe that we could do a good enough job to help them better target that. That's not true. So right data, right time, right location, right application, we can get you back a lot of that, and we can help target those good windows. And even in a climate change scenario, we will find those good weather windows to fly in, but you have to make it a system. You can't just be haphazard about it. You can't, think that, I know weather, and I don't like the weather guy, so I'm not gonna listen to him, or I'm gonna go shop for weather. That's not the way to run a business. You wouldn't run a business like that if it's data, and you gotta get your arms around it.
And general weather is just not enough.
No, it's not granular enough, and the products that are out there today, I think the big misconception is you can't do better. We can do better. It's just people have to pay to do a little bit better, right? Everything, you can solve this problem to a larger extent, but you're going to have to make a willing investment, and we got to amortize that cost across all the drone operators, so it becomes pennies a day for each of them to have really the highest quality weather data that you can have for this industry. And your app is not going to be good enough.
Do you think that artificial intelligence and machine learning will become so good that, based on weather prediction and pinpointed, pin drop accuracy, will prevent accidents?
Well, yes. So there's two aspects to artificial intelligence. One is in using it and actually trying to improve weather predictions. But the one thing I want to point out is when people tell you they're going to use artificial intelligence and they have this magic potion, just ask them where their data's coming from, because you can't machine learn your way out of bad data. That's number one. But as we get these data sets and we get these gaps filled and we start getting better information, what's going to happen is we already have the tools for this. We will drive those into somebody else's decision risk algorithm, and they're going to then do pre-planned flight planning based on that data, be machine to machine. So the human may not be involved in it, maybe shouldn't be. We don't want their biases. And then what we do then is they fly that mission. We'll keep, geofence areas, have that data go directly to a drone, and have it avoid the bad micro areas on the fly. That should reduce accidents.
Wow. And this is maybe a little bit more of a far out expansion on that question. Do you think that we'll become more effective and maybe even altering weather? I know I saw recently where, and you don't have to go too deep into that, but where I think might have been in the Middle East, where it's so dry and climate change and drought that there was some additional rain that fell from the sky. Do you think that we might get to that?
Well, geoengineering the weather is a scary topic. Now, if you're doing it tactically just to clear a runway, a fog, or you're doing it to try to seed some clouds to get some precip over an area, that's not a big deal. When you start trying to do things that are going to change the wind patterns at 300 feet because you want to fly and the winds are blowing 30 and you want to reduce them to 15, that gets a little bit into an area that I prefer not to get into.
Right.
But there will be some weather modification, and it will be tactical driven, and there are things you can do. but you need to know what you're doing, right? You don't want to, you don't want to have unintended consequences.
Right. Wow. Well, this will be interesting, especially as UAVs and autonomous vehicles will be used in situations of catastrophe and disaster, and getting close and getting information and helping with public safety. So when I think about this solution, particularly in your vantage point, public safety clearly in government are square in the middle of the the end users here. Who else should be thinking about how to better manage their overall weather strategy in a solution like TruWeather?
Well, first of all, I love that you used the word weather strategy. Every company, every organization should think of weather as anything else. You have to have a strategy to manage it. And so public safety needs a strategy to manage it. Big concern I have in public safety is as they start flying BV loss, there's liability issues, and we want to make sure that we're protecting our pilots. We don't want to put them in a position where they're going to have an incident and we haven't given them the tools or the training that they need in order to prevent that. That's number one. Number two is, in terms of the other industries, we have to manage the weather strategy in industry. If you're a power company and you're running pipeline or transmission line inspections and you want to start flying 10 or 20 miles, to do that, you got to remember your pilot is blind. The data that you see today is not what's happening all the time in that route. It's not. The FAA says you have to have knowledge of the weather you're flying in. You can't have that knowledge if you're not on the airframe. That worked well in manned aviation. It will not work if somebody's sitting in a basement flying a drone that's flying 10 miles. So we got to get better sensors out there. We got to fill those gaps. We got to figure out where the action is and put the investment in those areas. Then we got to train people on how to do it. You have to have very systematic workflow and processes and procedures. You have to have some automation in there to help make decisions. And it has to be a weather strategy, because if you do that, number one, you're going to get more efficient operations and you're going to really improve safety on it, and you're going to have a happier customer because you're going to go out and get your job done right the first time. And they like that.
And I can see a world where we've got little TruWeather sensors on all of our equipment, on all autonomous equipment, on public transportation, and it's really it's IoT, and it's giving real-time weather all the time. So I love this.
Just light it up, baby. Give me your sensors. I'll get it into our system, feed it back to you. You just turn on a switch, and we'll just watch these things pop up on the screen. And the more we get, the better, and everyone's going to benefit from it.
Wonderful. Well, Don, these have been your kind of 6.5 questions. We will be definitely talking to you more. Thank you so much for joining ZeoCast Live today at AUVSI Xponential, and we'll talk to you some more in the future.
Thank you for having me, Brian. You're doing wonderful work. Thank you.